There's a word you're using every single day, probably dozens of times, and it's quietly making everything harder. Not a word someone taught you to avoid, not a piece of jargon or a limiting belief someone pointed out in a workshop, just a word. It sounds harmless. It sounds honest. But that little word, in the wrong context, is building a cage around your thinking. And most of us have been living inside it for years, completely unaware. Now here's what we tend to think the problem is: the deadline that just keeps looming, the difficult client that never seems satisfied, the crushing pressure to perform, the packed calendar that makes you feel like you're constantly falling behind. The fact that no matter how much you do, there's always more waiting, more demanding your attention. We give it a name. We label it stress, burnout, anxiety. And we wait. We wait for the circumstances to change, for the external world to shift, so we can finally feel different, finally feel free. But here's the uncomfortable part, the part we rarely look at head-on. Think about the last time a friend came to you with a real problem, a significant one, a career crossroads, a tricky conflict at work, a big decision they just couldn't make. You probably saw it clearly, didn't you? You listened, you empathized, and then you gave them calm, measured, genuinely useful advice. You weren't inside it. You could see it for what it was. But when it's your problem, that same clarity disappears entirely. You don't think about it anymore. You become it. The problem isn't the external pressure. And that lens has a name. Researchers call it self-distancing. And before you write that off as some kind of abstract therapy speak, let me make it utterly concrete. Your brain has two distinct modes when it's under pressure, two ways it can operate. There's the mode where you're down in the mud, fully inside the feeling, reacting instinctively, spiraling with every thought. And then there's the mode where you're in a helicopter, still completely aware of what's happening below, still connected to the situation, but with enough altitude to actually think, to gain perspective.
When you utter the words, "I am so anxious right now," your brain's primal alarm system, the amygdala, treats it as a 5-alarm emergency. It instantly triggers fight or flight. The emotional center of your brain takes over completely. Rational thought, problem solving, perspective, they all get pushed out of the driver's seat. But here's what the research shows, consistently. If you shift the framing just slightly and ask yourself, explicitly, using your own name, okay, something changes, almost immediately. Your brain processes it differently. It perceives just enough distance to bring the logical, problem-solving part of your mind back online. The emotional volume drops. You can hear yourself think again.
Your brain is a brilliant advisor for everyone else, an incredible source of wisdom and perspective, and yet it's often a terrible one for itself the moment it gets emotionally invested. That's not a character flaw. That's just how the hardware works. That's built into your operating system. The question is whether you're going to keep letting it run on autopilot or if you're going to choose to upgrade. So if this is that effective and the evidence validating it is overwhelming, why don't we just do it? Why isn't this common practice? Because it's not a knowledge problem. We can read all the books, attend all the workshops. It's an identity problem. A lot of us have quietly, almost unconsciously, built our entire self-concept around our struggles. And those statements feel true. They feel honest. They even feel like self-awareness. But what they're actually doing is anchoring you to a version of yourself that you've outgrown or that you could easily transcend. And when someone or something, like a simple technique, challenges that deeply held identity, the ego doesn't go quietly. It argues, it rationalizes, it whispers, "That technique feels fake. That's not really me." Here's the thing. Stepping outside the I doesn't mean abandoning yourself. It means choosing to be the observer of your experience rather than the prisoner of it. That's not fake. But it requires something most people aren't willing to admit. That the self-narrative you've been protecting, the story you tell yourself about who I am, might be the very thing that's been holding you firmly in place. I want to speak directly to where a lot of you are right now. You're probably in your 30s or 40s. You've built something significant, a career, a reputation, a way of operating in the world that people respect, and that visibility carries weight. There's a certain performance to maintain, a competence to project, and the idea of admitting that you need a mental shift, that you've been your own bottleneck, that you're stuck, feels like it threatens everything you've constructed. It feels like a vulnerability you can't afford. There's also the sunk cost of it all.
The internal monologue that says, I've been doing it this way for 15 years. If I change now, what does that say about everything I've done before this? So instead, we keep the polished exterior intact, while the internal monologue keeps running on a destructive loop, burning energy, creating a fog of confusion, and quietly eroding the very clarity and peace we need most to move forward. That's not strength. And the real tragedy is that the wisdom is already there. You give it to other people constantly, effortlessly. The question is why you're the one person you won't give it to, the one person you deny that counsel. Here's the move, and it's just one simple, profound step.
The next time you feel that familiar tightening, the chest, the fog descending, the moment before you go internal and get swept away by emotion, don't follow the feeling in. Pause, take a breath, and then address yourself by name. Okay, your name. Your body is reacting because this matters to you. That's information, not a verdict. Now, you're not denying the emotion. You're not pushing it down. You're simply choosing not to let it run the meeting. This isn't a psychological trick. It's an act of profound self-leadership. Choosing to give yourself the same quality of calm, objective counsel you would give to anyone you genuinely cared about, anyone you wanted to see succeed. That's it. That's the whole shift. The difficulty isn't the technique itself.
The difficulty is deciding you're worth that kind of care, that level of respect. So I want to leave you with just one question. Not rhetorical, not inspirational. Just sit with it. What would it cost you, really cost you, to stop being the one person you refuse to advise well?